Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video I'm taking a bit of a break from my revision to give a bit of an update on the Bolens GT2000. The GT2000 is Dad's project, as I said in my update video, while I've been doing some schoolwork. So this is now completed and we'll run you through what we had to do to get there in a minute. But in the workshop at the moment is also one of our Bolens HT23s, not for a good reason, but that's not the focus of this video. We will just do a quick comparison of the two while they're sitting side by side. They actually have very similar sized engines and the gearboxes aren't that different. However, as you will have seen when Dad moved back there, the GT2000, the bonnet sits a lot lower. Obviously back here, the steering wheel and seat are at a similar level. But the biggest difference is probably the height at the front. And then the width of the HT is quite a bit bigger than the GT2000, which is probably the most striking difference between the two. Obviously the HT is on larger tyres, so it's expected to sit higher, but this one's got more kind of even height rather than the GT2000, which starts off a lot shorter. The last video on this project was quite a while ago, and in that video we talked about the heads being warped, our plan to make a bracket to hold the starter motor, and also how we were going to deal with the water that had kind of gone into the engine in the flooding that it was somewhat exposed to. Now obviously these videos are a lot easier when we're talking you through the processes of things we're doing, but this project is now pretty much done. The engine is obviously in there, it works, it runs, the whole tractor runs. So we're going to have to try and explain to you what we did with this as it is, which is going to be very difficult because you can't really point to anything in here, but we will try to explain as best as possible. We have quite a long list of jobs we did on this engine, and I have that list off to my right, so if I'm kind of looking off in this direction, that is what I'm looking at, because there's no chance I'd remember all of that in one. So I'll start off with some stuff that we kind of talked about in the last video on this project, which was the starter motor kind of mounting point repair, where we made up a little bracket to replace where the casting had cracked on the engine before and the starter motor had come loose. So put that bracket in there to stop it from going anywhere, and the starter motor is way down there, which shows why any starter motor work on one of these engines is an engine out job. Now, while we had that off, we completely rebuilt the starter motor too, to make sure that that was all good and we weren't putting in tons of effort for a starter motor that wasn't going to work anyway. And we also, once we decided or worked out that the starter motor was good, we fitted a new starter bendix, which is the little gear part on the end with the spring to push it back when you kind of disengage the starter and all of that stuff. So that starter motor setup now works very well, as it should do. Then another thing we kind of mentioned in the last video was the heads being warped. To counter that, we skimmed the heads and fitted new head gaskets so that that's all airtight. Then after that, we kind of had a bit of a clean up around the engine because there was a lot of oil in certain places. One of the places was around the stator, which we cleaned and tested to make sure that that part of the charging circuit would work as we wanted it to. And after that, we replaced the front crankshaft oil seal, which is the seal that had been leaking for all of the oil to go out of that crankshaft area and onto the stator, which is behind the flywheel, which is behind this plastic part here. So down there, obviously the oil coming out of there had completely sprayed the stator, so we couldn't check it without giving it a good clean first. Then we replaced all of the fuel lines because they were a bit cracked, and of course the fuel filter and stuff like that. The fuel filter is something that should probably be done regularly, and this was definitely overdue some of the important service work for this engine. After that, we cleaned out the carburetor because obviously old fuel sitting in there wouldn't do it any favours, so we cleaned all of that out to get any traces of that or possible water in there from the flooding, because we weren't sure how much of the engine was affected by flood water. After that, we had a look at the valve gaps. We lapped the valves and cleaned all of that up too. We tested the other engine electrics to make sure that was all good, and we didn't have too much work to do on those. One electric feature of this engine that we did have to do some work on is the electric PTO engagement system, the PTO being on the other end of the crankshaft on this engine, which you might be able to see through the grille here, but it's the top pulley there. And as I said, that's electric engagement, so we just had to make sure that that worked properly. Then we switched the engine oil filter and did an oil change on this. Again, the old oil had some water in it, so we definitely wanted to change that. And it's a service point that should be done regularly anyway, so this was probably overdue, that service. Other service things that we did was we put new spark plugs in there, and we put on a new air filter too in there. And we repaired and fitted up some of the engine tin. When we got this engine and this tractor to work on, the engine was out and we kind of had a box full of engine tin bits. Not all of it was complete, so Dad had been kind of piecing all of the bits together and had to weld up a few holes. As you can see there, probably not Dad's finest work when it comes to the welder, but there were some pretty big holes that he was patching up. And it's all functional now, and obviously all of these bits needed to be connected so that the air movement around the engine was good enough to cool it sufficiently, with this being an air-cooled engine. Now there was a few engine fixings that were missing, so we replaced them with new ones. As you can see easily here, new shiny bolts on there. And then once we'd replaced all of these fixings, it was time to run and test the engine on the little pallet setup that we had, that I think we showed you in a previous video. And we let that run for a decent amount of time just to make sure that it didn't have any overheating issues or anything like that. And at that point we were happy with the engine and ready to put it back into the tractor. Obviously we didn't have the bonnet, the front grille part, or these side panels on, so it was quite easy with the engine crane just to lower this down into position. Now on the tractor, Dad did a full rebuild of the front end, which he had to replace some wheel bearings, and we turned this tyre round because of the excessive wear on one side. That tyre on that side also had to have a new tube in it because that came to us with a puncture in it. Rear end, we also had to put a new tube in one of them because it had gone flat while it was sitting here. Also on the rear end was a new hydrostatic filter and new oil for the back end too, so that was all topped up. And then the engine got put in and we checked the tractor electrics with the engine starting up, and that was fine. The next test Dad did was the power steering, so he turned the wheel and a stream of hydraulic oil shot out of the hydraulics line. You can still kind of see the drip marks along the floor there from where it shot out of there. This is the original hydraulics line. I'm not sure how well you can see, but we kind of circled it in pen. There's a crack on there. There you go, that shows it quite well. And that's where all of the hydraulic oil spewed out of it. So we had to get a new line replaced or made up for that. But then after that, we took it for a test drive, and we're happy with how it ran, happy with how the tractor drove. So that's good. We did note a few issues with the tractor, but those are things that can be sorted at a later date, either by Gareth or by us in future. So we are happy that we've got this tractor back to a working standard for Gareth. There's been thunder and lightning today, but there's now a break in the weather, so hopefully we can go out and stay dry. Now, this hasn't been started in a few days, so this is definitely going to be a cold start, but we will see how it does, and then hopefully take it for a bit of a drive before the weather gets worse again. Well, that's the first time we've worked on a tractor for someone else, so I'm glad it works well. And as much as we do like our older tractors, this was definitely fun to ride on something newer and a bit quicker. So that is a quick overview of the work that Dad has done on the Bolens GT2000 while I've been doing my exams. Sorry again for not being able to go in too much detail on this and kind of having to cram it all at the end, but With me focusing on my exams, I didn't have much time to help Dad with this and do videos during that time. Now Gareth is coming tomorrow to pick this up, assuming he's happy with it, and hopefully he will be. But that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.